All right, ready to dive into some really interesting stuff today.
Definitely always up for a good deep dive.
Great. We're taking a look at Bondada Engineering Ltd.
Interesting company. I've had my eye on them for a while.
Me too. They're based in India, doing some pretty big things in the telecom and solar energy sectors.
Yeah, their growth has been pretty amazing.
We've got a stock report, some company announcements, their investor presentation, and a general overview to work with today.
Sounds like we've got plenty to dig into. Should give us a good overall picture.
Absolutely. And to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, their revenues jumped like crazy.
Yeah, how much we talking?
116% year over year. It's wild.
Wow, that's impressive. No wonder they're on your radar.
Exactly. Plus, they've got this massive order book, and they're looking to expand into new areas.
Like what?
Railways, for one. Ambitious, right?
Definitely ambitious. But they seem to be making some smart moves. It's not just about riding the wave in those industries.
You're right. It feels like they're actively shaping things.
Yeah, exactly. They're not just along for the ride. They're in the driver's seat.
I like that analogy.
Ugh.
So let's get into the details. Bondada Engineering Ltd. was founded back in 2012.
Relatively young company then.
Yeah, you could say that. They're publicly traded on the Bombay Stock Exchange.
Okay, makes sense.
Their bread and butter is providing EPC and O&M services. That's engineering, procurement, and construction, and operations and maintenance.
Right, the core of many infrastructure projects.
Exactly. And they do all this for both telecom and solar energy projects.
So they've got their fingers in two really hot pies right now.
Exactly. And they don't just stop there. They also manufacture stuff like telecom towers and solar structures.
So they're involved in pretty much every stage of the process. Interesting.
Vertical integration, right?
Smart move. Gives them more control, potentially higher profits.
And they're working with some seriously big names.
Oh, yeah. Like who?
Reliance Jio, Airtel, BSNL, even Sterlite Power.
Wow, that's a pretty impressive client list. Speaks volumes about their reputation.
Absolutely. Shows they're not messing around. Okay, so let's break down this insane revenue growth, shall we?
Let's do it.
They went from 371 crore in fiscal year 2023
Okay.
to a whopping 801 crore in fiscal year 2024. That's a massive jump. What's driving that kind of growth, in your opinion?
Well, breaking it down, their EPC services saw the biggest increase, contributed something like 70% of their total revenue in fiscal year 2024.
So, huge demand for their project execution skills, both in telecom and solar.
Yeah, seems like it. Think about the kind of projects we're talking about here. Entire telecom networks, massive solar farms.
It's mind-blowing how fast they've managed to scale up.
For sure.
And it's not just EPC services that are booming. Their product segment, which includes those telecom towers and building materials we mentioned earlier, saw an 86% increase between fiscal year 2022 and 2024.
So that move into manufacturing is really paying off for them.
It seems so. Could give them a more stable revenue stream in the long run, too.
Yeah, smart move.
Now, here's a fun fact. Bondada has a history of revenue seasonality.
Seasonality. Interesting.
Yeah, typically their first half of the fiscal year brings in about 30 to 35% of their yearly revenue.
Okay.
But the second half, that's where they really rake it in,
Right.
65 to 70%. What do you think? Something investors should be aware of.
Oh, definitely. That kind of seasonality is likely tied to the nature of EPC work.
Yeah, things like weather, project timelines, all that.
Makes sense. Investors should absolutely factor that in when they're looking at Bondada's performance quarter by quarter.
Good point. But they are off to a great start, though.
Oh, yeah.
Already closed the first half of fiscal year 2025 with 483 crore in revenue.
Not bad at all.
And get this, their order book's looking even stronger.
How strong are we talking?
It's tripled in just 6 months. As of October 2024, it's sitting at a massive 5,342 crore.
Whoa, that's a serious order book.
Yeah, and it's not just concentrated in one area either. It's spread across their EPC, O&M, and their subsidiaries. Helps manage risk, right?
Absolutely. Diversification is key. What's the breakdown like?
EPC takes the lion's share, about 4,302 crore. Then O&M at 946 crore.
So project execution is definitely their forte.
It seems so. And they've got some seriously impressive projects in the pipeline.
Like what? Anything stand out?
A 600 milliW solar project with NLC, a 68 milliW solar project with Singareni, major telecom projects with BSNL, just to name a few.
Wow, those are some big undertakings.
Yeah, these projects, a lot of them are detailed in their investor presentation, are huge. Really shows you the scale of their operations.
Long-term revenue visibility too, right?
Exactly. Most of these orders will be delivered over the next 18 to 24 months.
That kind of stability is golden. All right, so they're clearly busy, but are they actually making money? Let's talk profitability.
Good point. Time to crunch some numbers.
Exactly. Back again, digging deeper into Bondada Engineering Ltd.
We've covered a lot of ground already, haven't we? Their growth, their ambitions, it's been fascinating.
Yeah, really impressive. But now it's time to get down to brass tacks, right?
Absolutely. Let's talk money. Specifically, their financials.
Sounds good to me. We touched on their EBITDA and net profit margins earlier, but let's really dissect those numbers.
What are we looking for here?
Well, we want to see how efficient they are at turning revenue into actual profit, how well they manage those costs.
Makes sense. So their EBITDA margin, it's been climbing steadily, right?
That's what we see in their investor presentation, yeah. And that's generally a good sign.
How so?
It means they're squeezing more profit out of each rupee of revenue, becoming more efficient.
Got it. So what could be behind this improvement?
Well, several things, possibly. One thing that comes to mind is economies of scale.
Ah, yeah, as they grow and take on bigger projects.
Exactly. They can leverage their size, maybe negotiate better prices from suppliers, reduce production costs.
And we know they've been expanding their own manufacturing, too. That could be helping.
Absolutely. Vertical integration, like bringing that BLDC motor production in-house with the Atpol Technologies acquisition.
Right. More control over the supply chain, potentially lower costs.
Exactly. Now, their net profit margin, that's also been going up.
Which tells us
That they're not just growing the top line, the revenue, but the bottom line is improving too, the actual profit.
that's what we like to see. So all good news so far.
So far, so good. But we need some context, right?
Like what?
How do these margins stack up against their competitors? Are they outperforming the industry average? That's the real test.
True. Unfortunately, we don't have specific competitor data in our sources this time.
Yeah, that would be helpful. But hey, more research for us, right?
Always. So while their profitability looks great on paper, we need to keep that bigger picture in mind.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears a bit. Sectoral exposure.
Right. We know they're doing EPC work in telecom and solar energy, but what about infrastructure in general? How much are those different sectors contributing to their revenue?
Good question. So from the overview, we see EPC services make up a hefty chunk, like 70% of their revenue in fiscal year 2024.
We're talking big numbers here. 12,500 telecom towers installed, over 4,300 kilometers of optical fiber cable laid. And on the solar side, over 240 milliamp of capacity installed.
Yeah, they're really dominating those telecom and solar sectors.
No doubt. But infrastructure isn't broken out as a separate segment, is it?
Not directly, no. But it's intertwined with that EPC work, especially in telecom and solar projects.
Right. Building those towers, those solar plants, all that requires some serious infrastructure.
Exactly. So infrastructure is definitely a significant contributor, even if it's not explicitly stated.
And as they move into the railway sector, that infrastructure expertise becomes even more valuable, right?
Oh, for sure. Railways, that's a whole new ballgame.
Massive potential, too. India's railway network, it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And all those modernization plans, expansion projects.
Prime territory for an EPC company like Bondada.
Sounds like they're well positioned to take advantage of that. But let's circle back to their debt levels for a minute.
Right. Important to keep that in mind. We know they've got some debt, and they're planning to raise more funds.
So how's their leverage looking? Liquidity, cash flow trends.
Well, their debt-to-equity ratio, it's actually pretty low.
Meaning,
They're not relying too heavily on debt to finance their growth. That's a good thing.
that's reassuring. What about their ability to cover short-term obligations?
Their current ratio, which measures that short-term liquidity, seems healthy.
Okay, so they've got enough to meet those immediate needs and their cash flow from operations.
That's been consistently positive, which is a fantastic sign. Their core business is generating enough cash to cover expenses and still have something left over.
So generating cash, managing debt responsibly, good liquidity. That's a pretty solid financial picture, wouldn't you say?
Overall, yeah, very solid. But remember, they're planning to raise up to 500 crore. That's going to have an impact.
Right, we need to see how that new capital is used and how it affects their leverage and liquidity down the line.
Absolutely. Transparency is key. Now let's bring it back to their big vision, that goal of being a top 5 EPC company in India by 2030.
Ambitious, to say the least. How are they planning to pull that off?
It's a multi-pronged strategy. We talked about railways, but they're also expanding within renewable energy beyond solar.
Right, battery energy storage systems, BESS, and green hydrogen.
Exactly. And then there's the international expansion, taking their telecom and renewable energy expertise global.
Wow, they're really going for it. So let's break down each of these areas, look at the potential, and maybe some of the challenges too. Starting with railways. Why is that sector so appealing to them?
Well, India's railway network is undergoing this massive modernization, expansion too. Huge opportunity for EPC companies like Bondada.
Right, they can use their existing skills, infrastructure development, project management, maybe even that BLDC motor technology from their acquisition.
Exactly. A lot of potential synergies there.
But let's be real, the railway sector in India, it's not a walk in the park, right?
Definitely not. Lots of regulations, bureaucratic hurdles, fierce competition from established players.
So Bondada needs more than just technical know-how.
For sure. They need to understand the rules, build relationships with government agencies, and be ready to fight for their share of the market.
High stakes, but high rewards too, potentially. If they can make it in railways, it'll be a huge boost. All right, let's move on to their plans within renewable energy. Why the focus on BS and green hydrogen? What's driving that?
These are really interesting areas. The demand for grid stability, energy storage, that's driving the BSM market. As we see more solar and wind power, BSS becomes crucial to keep the lights on, so to speak.
On green hydrogen, I'm hearing more and more about that.
It's getting a lot of attention, yeah. Producing hydrogen using renewable energy, it's a potential game changer for tackling climate change. Lots of applications. Transportation, industry, even power generation.
So Bondada's jumping on that clean energy wave.
It's a smart business move, and it aligns with global trends. But,
There's always a but, isn't there?
well, these are still relatively new technologies. The BS market's evolving rapidly. Green hydrogen production is expensive.
So Bondada needs to be cautious, invest strategically, and really build up their expertise,
No doubt. Now, the last piece of the puzzle, their international expansion.
taking their show on the road. Telecom and renewable energy expertise going global.
It's a natural progression for a company with big ambitions. But going international, it's a whole different ballgame.
What are some of the challenges they'll face?
Understanding different cultures, regulations, how business is done in different countries.
Right. And they'll be going up against established global players. Tough competition.
Definitely. Plus, the logistics of operating in multiple countries, currency fluctuations, different legal systems, it's a lot to handle.
So while the potential is huge, so are the risks.
They need to plan carefully, find the right partners, and be flexible. No easy feat.
Welcome back for the final part of our Bondada Engineering Deep Dive.
We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We have growth, financials, those big expansion plans. It's all been pretty impressive.
No doubt. They're a company with a lot of potential, that's for sure.
But now it's time to try and put it all together.
Exactly. Can they sustain this momentum? Can they really reach that goal of becoming one of India's top 5 EPC companies by 2030?
Big questions. No crystal ball, unfortunately.
No crystal ball. But we can look at the key factors, the things that could make or break their success.
Good point. So what do you see as the biggest factors? The make or break stuff?
Well, their track record's pretty solid, you know? Consistent revenue growth, strong profitability, good strategic execution. They've got a lot going for them.
Yeah, they seem to be adaptable, willing to innovate, expanding product lines, making smart acquisitions, getting into those new technologies like BSS and green hydrogen.
Right. They're not afraid to take risks, seize opportunities.
But those risks, those ambitious plans, they come with challenges too.
Oh, absolutely. We touched on some of those. Competition, for one.
Yeah, the EPC market in India, it's crowded.
Lots of big players fighting for every project. Bondada needs to keep innovating, stay ahead of the curve.
And as they move into railways, international markets, that competition gets even tougher.
Global giants, tons of experience, deep pockets. It's a whole different ballgame.
So how do you see them navigating that?
Partnerships will be key. Finding the right local partners, understanding the market, and being flexible, ready to adapt.
Makes sense. But even with the best strategy, it all comes down to execution, doesn't it?
Couldn't agree more. Those ambitious plans, they're just words on paper if they can't execute. Delays, cost overruns, those can really hurt.
Damage their reputation, impact their bottom line.
Exactly. They need to keep a tight grip on project management, maintain those quality standards, manage risk effectively.
And as they scale up, that only gets harder.
It does. Plus, there's all the stuff outside their control, the macro environment.
Ah, right. Global economy, interest rates, currency fluctuations, all that fun stuff.
It can really throw a wrench in the works, make it harder to secure funding, hit those profit targets.
So lots of potential pitfalls, but also immense opportunity.
It's a balancing act, for sure. Bondada's future, it hinges on their ability to execute, to compete, to adapt to whatever comes their way.
It's been fascinating to dive into their world, see what they're all about.
A company with vision, a clear strategy, and that drive to succeed. It'll be interesting to see how they evolve, how they tackle those challenges.
Exactly. And to our listeners out there, I encourage you to keep exploring too.
Don't just take our word for it. Dig into those financials, follow those key projects, keep up with the industry trends.
That's the whole point of the deep dive, right?
Wow.
We give you the starting point, but the real learning, the real insights, those come from your own research, your own analysis.
Stay curious, stay informed, keep diving deep. That's the key to success in investing and in life, I'd say.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Bondada Engineering.
My pleasure. Until next time.